Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the InsideLowell Daily Pulse, the Monday, March 31st edition of the Daily Pulse, kicking off a brand new week as we end another month here. 3 months in already. Holy smokes, folks. But time flies when you're having fun, and we've been having an awful lot of fun here. All of our local communities keeping us very busy. As we like to say, the Daily Pulse takes a peek at Lowell and the world around it. And today we're going to take a peek at Lowell, maybe because all these issues affect us, but we're going to go around it a little bit because joining us is one of our insiders from the town of Chelmsford. Joe Reddy is back in studios. Good morning, Joe. Good to have you here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on. I always love to come on and talk about Chelmsford, and election day is a fun day for me. I always like election day.
So it's not an April Fool's joke. The Chelmsford town election is actually tomorrow, Tuesday, April 1st.
That it is. Well, it might turn out to be an April Fool's joke, but we'll see how it goes.
So yeah, I got a bunch of questions about it for you. The lack of interest in one race, arguably the most important race, right? The select board, but you do have a competitive school committee race and you do have a ballot question. So I'm curious how the turnout will be. Plus you were the moderator at that school committee debate, right?
I was. So I moderated the Chelmsford Democratic Town Committee debate. We always have candidates come in for town elections. We believe in democracy and really promoting, local office and participation. So, it's important to get people to voice their opinions, and that's how the voters ultimately get to make, their decisions. So
I remember covering a couple of those through the years when I was at WCAP. Do you still do them in the police station?
We do. So
does that scare candidates off from coming in and actually participating? Do they feel intimidated? Because in Lowell, apparently, people are afraid to go cast a mail-in ballot at the police station lot.
I've always felt good about the Chelmsford police and the presence that they provided. No, truthfully, we have a very well-run, community policing team. So I don't know. I mean, everybody's different. Certainly, I think the Democratic Town Committee would have made accommodations if somebody had mentioned that they, felt that way. But certainly, you bring up a good point.
My attempt to drag you into Lowell's political squabbles. We'll focus on Chelmsford and then the world around it, because Joe's got a lot to say since he was last here. Let me quickly thank our Daily Pulse sponsors, Ray Booten, licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, business, or a commercial property, Ray Booten is your man. Find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. I say that as I've got a realtor sitting right next to me here in the station. They're all good. We're partial to Ray here, here at Inside Lowell, but we like Joe Reddy as well. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. WellPoint is the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. And a reminder for anybody insured under the state GIC, open enrollment begins Wednesday, April 2nd. So if you're not happy with your healthcare provider, take a look at our friends at WellPoint. If you are happy with your health provider, you might be happier with WellPoint. Take a peek out there. And if you're already with WellPoint and you want to maybe switch, maybe you're in a different circumstance now in your life, look for a plan that might be more beneficial to you. But remember, open enrollment starts this Wednesday. Back here with Joe Reddy. All right, so let's take a look. Let's start with the town election in Chelmsford. 2 open seats are on the ballots, and I get it, they're always open. But as you know, you've followed this. Whenever an incumbent, in particular a long-term and popular incumbent, decides not to seek re-election, the candidates flood in because this is their chance, right? And you have not one of those, but 2 of those in 2025. And you have one candidate for George Dixon's seat and one for Virginia Crocker Timmons' seat.
Correct. So
what does that tell us?
Yeah, it's the lack of interest. I think it's an interesting combination, right? You have, Patricia Wojcik, she's been there for a number of years. This might even be, I think, her 6th term. If she wins, obviously she's unopposed. So a lot of times candidates don't want to run against an incumbent because it takes a tremendous amount of resources. But Aaron Cunningham had put his name out there the last time when George Dixon ran, and he kind of played spoiler because that would have actually been an uncontested race. But he did put his hat in the ring, and he was well prepared. He put together a great campaign, and I think people really appreciated the level of expertise that he would bring to the town. So, naturally, I think when he threw his hat in the ring, already probably having all of the, campaign stuff in force already from last year, it's almost like as if you were going to be running against an incumbent, right? George Dixon vacating his seat then leaves that 2-year term. But, Jeff Hardy, who's actually running for that position, is a well-known, well-respected person with the business association in town. And so it's not like he doesn't walk in with, a tremendous amount of support and resources, to run a campaign should somebody have challenged him. So, I think there's, from a landscape standpoint, people look at it and say, okay, this would not be an easy election to win should they put their hat in the ring. Now, some of it is, there's not a whole lot of major controversy or issues that can be addressed by the select board at this point. Not that there aren't always issues and controversy, but, where they have extended the town manager's contract for, I believe it's at least 4 years, there's really not a whole lot of decisions to be made on that front. And so, people I think are more focused on schools and on, other aspects that they can, provide their input on. So that election, unfortunately, will go uncontested. I don't love that. I think races being contested is the best thing that we can do for our communities. Brings out a lot of great thought process. You get to learn a lot about, what it is that's happening and what we can do to improve. So that's a loss for Chelmsford, I think.
Yeah. So as I'm watching it from the outside, generally, if when you don't get a lot of interest, it can be viewed as complete apathy, or people are so disgusted they're not even going to bother showing up, or people are happy with the way things are being run and like, why fight the status quo, because I'm kind of happy with it. Does that really have anything to do with?
Yeah, I think voter apathy is a big part of it. I think most people now look at our local government as though it's just a professionally run entity that they have no input or say in how things are done. Now, there's obviously a contingent of people that feel like they can show up at every meeting and voice their opinion. But at the end of the day, there's only so much a select board can do now. They don't really run the town the way they did 20, 30 years ago. They're really just policy-based, positions. Some of it, like in Jeff Hardy's case, I'm sure he'll be looking to roll back some of the split classification. That's a major vote that the board can take, but for the most part, they're really just providing, a level of direction for the town. And it's been kind of rammed down boards' throats over the years that they really don't run the day-to-day of the town, that the town manager is ultimately responsible for that, and they're really there to be the sounding board for the community. And I think a lot of times the community takes it out on these elected officials, but they really only have so much say or control. And if we go back in time, like with Chelmsford, it's pretty heavy handed, right? You don't have a whole lot of control. So you either can fire the person or keep the person, right? But you can't meddle in between. So ultimately you're forced into these very, aggressive decisions, right? And so I think people have just become, apathetic to it. And they just say, no, I'm not going to put my time and effort towards that if it's really not going to bring any sort of meaningful change.
And you mentioned the town manager, Paul Cohen, and the fact that he has a new contract. I feel like the previous couple of elections were referendums on him. There was a movement to remove him. There was a time where everyone thought he was gone, and then he kind of ended up being able to weather that storm. Do you believe that folks are generally happy at this point with the way the town is being run, or they figured, well, we tried, we failed, it's, we'll wait till he's done?
Well, I think you have different segments. I think you have people that are unhappy with certain aspects of how the town is run, right? From a managerial standpoint, Paul Cohen is excellent, right? Like, you looked at a lot of these other towns like Drake-It and places where they were having all sorts of budgetary issues. We didn't really experience that as hard in Chelmsford, and a lot of that is a testament to his leadership. I think if you look back, a lot of it was really circling around how we dealt with the community, right? An example would be, say sidewalks, right? You've got a lot of people that want to see sidewalks built near schools. We spend a lot of money on these plans and assessments, and then we end up doing nothing. And, people were upset about that, and even at one town meeting, Paul said, listen, under my leadership, there will be no new sidewalks in Chelmsford. And part of it is, you got to weigh and balance what he's dealing with, right? He's, every time you put in a sidewalk, you got to maintain it. You've got to, take care of it during the winter, right? So there's two sides of it. But, from a community standpoint, you're like, this feature would be very beneficial to kids and to our community, right? And those are just small examples. Or even when we had like a major school heating issue, and it's unfortunately that falls under the DPW at that time and under Paul's leadership, right? So the anger and the focus was directed towards the town manager, and I think he took it personally, which in some respects, if you're ever in management of facilities, anything that somebody brings up, you probably take it as a personal kind of a attack, right? But I think how we handle it as a community matters, right? I think listening to residents, letting them talk, that's important. I've always believed in that. And, even in this debate, one of the questions that was asked of the select board members is, are you going to release a 3-minute cap on, new open business? Because a lot of times residents are trying to bring forward, concerns or ideas, and, they're cut down at the knees before they can really even get a full statement out there. Meanwhile, their concern is that from an administration standpoint, they can talk indefinitely, right? So you as the public, are somewhat hamstrung by the fact that you don't have really the microphone to be able to have that discussion. So, and you know what? People don't really understand how government works. And I think that a lot of times they come across as being crazy because they don't understand the proper channels in which to bring forth, some sort of change, right? And government's just different than business, right? Like a lot of times a CEO, they can make a decision and boom, it happens. But in, government, you have to bring a consensus. You have to have, some sort of process and vote to really make a change. So some of it's just community education, getting people to understand how, local municipal government works. And some of it is, trying to better help them. And I will say this in fairness to Paul Cohen, I wrote an article on, InsideLowell about, we did have a citizen that brought up a concern about how we were funding, studies and how we were going to be bonding it out. And he had a different process in which he wanted to do it. And I think Paul has learned a lot from those past years and said, you know what, let's let this one roll out. And I'm going to let town meeting really decide if they think that my approach is the best approach, or if, Mr. 𝐏𝐿𝐥𝐲's approach is the right approach. And I think ultimately town meeting decided, you know what, Paul is 100% right. This is how we should do it. And we voted accordingly, right? I liked his approach there where he's like, I'm going to let the resident bring forth the petition and I'm going to support the petition, but this is how I feel about it. So that's...
All right. So seems to be some general, at least, happiness or satisfaction with the way the town side is being run.
Yeah, sure.
The schools, and then the ballot question. We're going to get to those in a quick second with Joe Reddy. He's our guest today on the InsideLowell Daily Pulse. Just want to thank our sponsors quickly here. Ray Booten, licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both states as well. Find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Thank you to the Washington Savings Bank, banking that feels like home. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life in Greater Lowell through strategic, impactful philanthropy. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency trusted to insure your most valuable assets since 1982. And by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City. Pirates came oh so close to notching their first win of the year this past Friday night at the Tsongas Center. Came up short. They'll get on the win column soon, and they'll be back at the Tsongas Center soon as well. Joe Reddy never went away, and he's got a great winning streak going here. So you did get to moderate the debates, as we said, and the school committee race. That's where we have some contested races. And you said that was actually a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, so basically you have three candidates that are running. You have John Moses, who is an incumbent. You have Maria Santos, who is an incumbent. And you have a challenger, Doreen Deschler. And they all have varying, interests in how they want to see the school approach. I think national politics is playing a big part in that particular election. I think there's a huge differential in how they see the schools being run, and it showed during that debate. John Moses has been working hard to try to bring in a new school to our system through MSBA, right? They've been working towards this new Parker School, middle school, and I think he's worried a lot about how federal funding will impact the potential of that new school coming in, how funding to the schools will be impacted. We talked a lot about, just the presence of ICE and, how that might have a chilling effect over students at the school system. And, Maria brought up a lot of, points about, her own journey as someone that had immigrated here into the United States, right? So, she brought a lot of great perspective that I think, people were interested in hearing. And then Doreen, I think, has a kind of an opposite approach. I think, she looks at it more like, and I think she made the point, like, we should be allowing, ICE into the school and let them do what they need to do, right? And so, again, this is a Democratic town committee debate, so the audience is, all Democratic people. Well, no, I saw some Republicans up there, but a couple of my friends were sitting in the front row there asking questions too. So I don't want to say there weren't Republicans there, but
is that an issue? Is there a lot of legitimate fears of immigration enforcement? Is Chelmsford home to a large illegal immigrant or migrant population? I wouldn't guess that, but
well, I think it's just the the media headlines, right? And so whether you're one or you're 900, illegal immigrants in a particular community, if you're fearing that you might get picked up on the way to school, that's going to impact your day-to-day ability to learn. Now, some people may not have a humanitarian approach towards this and feel like they want that kid picked up on the way to school. That's a ideology and, a way that you're approaching it, right? I think from a school perspective, or from John and Maria's perspective, the Department of Education and the state has made it very clear that, they're not allowing, ICE in our school systems, right? And so the school committee really has no ability to provide any sort of like policy oversight on that, right? Their job is to make sure kids can safely learn and they can learn in an environment that is, appropriate. But, with the elimination of DEI at the federal level on a number of fronts, that was a big talking point that came up. And, I personally think DEI is a good thing. I've always believed in it as for what it is, right? So, if you don't believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, like, what do you believe in, right? Uniformity, inequity, right? Exclusion, right? I don't think anybody feels that way, right? And I think,
nobody's against people who are diverse or different.
Right.
Or well, I shouldn't say nobody. There are people who
there's certainly
can't stand other people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you look at history, right? I mean, we've battled through racism, we've battled through socioeconomic issues that have existed over the years. I think the problem that exists now, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Democratic Party, because part of their issue is that they're not understanding the majority and how they feel. The majority wants common sense leadership, right? So, for instance, DEI as a title makes sense, right? But it really has to stand for what it is, right? It has to actually be all encompassing. You can't just use it as a methodology to empower just minority groups into positions, right? It has to actually encompass everybody and work as a cohesive thing, right? And so every department and every place is different. But I think and that's where I look at like even Doge, right? Like, it's like they want government efficiency. Now, how they plan to achieve that, you may not like it, right? But I don't, like, if you talk to the average person and said, hey, I really like to achieve government efficiency, they're not like, no, I don't want that, right? Everybody wants their government to be efficient. Everybody wants their government to be responsive.
Until you start trying to make it efficient, and man, you start to see some opposition out there that's
And to a certain degree,
Bizarre.
I see it on both sides. Like if it's proposed by Democrats, the Republicans instantly hate it. If the Republicans propose it, the Democrats instantly hate it. What happened to the days when, we sit down and really look through an issue and say, okay, here are the things that are impacting these particular groups. This is how maybe this policy then impacts this group, right? And really try to come up with a real solution instead of just pointing fingers and blaming people. Like that part bothers me to no end. I would rather roll up my sleeves, have an honest conversation, and we try to work through it. Now, I have a lot of friends that are Republicans, a lot of friends that are Democrats. I got a lot of friends that are left-wing Democrats, we'll call it, right? They make good points on certain things, right? It's taking those points and bringing them into the greater good, right? And how do we make things work for everyone, not just for a particular segment of the population?
Yeah, and the DEI issue, which you brought up and was brought up as part of the debate, one of the things in there is like we love celebrating multicultural,
Absolutely.
diversity in our communities and whatnot. Do we then turn around in schools and teach that if you're white, you're born racist? Which was going on in some school districts. Is that an issue? So it was Doreen Deschler who was kind of taking the point of view that we need to move away from the DEI. Is that what she was saying? Is that an issue in the Chelmsford schools? Or was
I think I think her approach is more, she'd like to have a lot more insight into the curriculum and how it is implemented, specifically on types of literature or books or things of that nature, or what we're teaching the kids in the school system. I think, and this kind of goes back to like that whole select board thing, right? Like, unfortunately, as a school committee, you really can't make like very specific changes to a curriculum, right? Like, I mean, you could probably create policies that ultimately, hamstring a superintendent, but like if you look at Chelmsford school systems, probably one of the best run school system in the district. We were fortunate enough to take Jay Lang, and I think Lowell's still reeling from that. And we thank our lucky stars every day. But, if you start to really like put that kind of political pressure on it, the superintendents don't want to stay in those type of systems. They move on to other places. So you have to weigh and measure that in how you handle yourself as a school committee member. So
the issue that could rear its ugly head with DEI is, as the federal government has said, this is now illegal, and there's a Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action, which kind of may back up what's being said. But if the town is the school district, to your knowledge, and the town to some degree, is it using language, are continuing to use certain language and host/sponsor certain events that could cause, catch somebody's attention in Washington, D.C. and lead to a cutoff of funding to the Chelmsford public schools and or to the community of Chelmsford as well. Is that a concern? And is the town manager, is the school superintendent, and conversely the select board and the school committee, are they trying to address that and see where they're going to go? So, some are openly defying. Michelle Wu, she's openly defying. Maura Healey is openly defying. Others are like, I get the sense that here in Lowell, they're all, let's just not say these things. Let's do whatever it is we're doing and just not draw attention to it.
Well, it's like I can't think of any specific examples, right? But that kind of goes to my overall arching theme of, if you really feel like something is impacting you, right? That DEI is having a negative effect towards you in some way, then you should bring that forward, right? So, if somebody feels like it's overly teaching this and that they feel like, you'd brought up a point about, a white person being racist just for being white, right? Like, I've never seen that kind of rhetoric here in Massachusetts, but I'm sure it exists somewhere, right?
Lowell school teachers had undergone a diversity training where the book that was
so you need to bring that to the forefront, right? Because that's how we improve these programs so that they really are representative of what they should be, right? They should be diverse. They should provide equity. They should provide inclusion of everyone. That's the goal, right? Like, I go to the YMCA here in Lowell, and it's like, I can't think of a better place that's like, really inclusive of everything, right? Like, you walk around, everyone's like, oh yeah, you can be a part of this, or you can do this. Like, it's an amazing facility where I think they live that motto. We need as a society to kind of work through that and figure out how we can be, more inclusive, right? If there are certain segments, but again, we also have to recognize that, like, let's say take it for hiring, right? There's only one position. At some point, you are excluding people, right? I mean, that's just society. Not everybody can win everything. Not everybody needs to get a participation award. You know, somebody's going to get a trophy at the end, right? So
to me, the battle over DEI is that middle letter, the E. Diversity is great. Inclusion, great. E is it equity, which it is, or is it equality? That's where the debate starts.
Right.
Do you put the ball in the middle of the field and have, like, that's how we kicked off dodgeball games in school, right? You put the ball in the middle, everybody gets behind the line, and the first one to get it gets it. Or do you put the ball closer to one side of the field and let?
Well, I think that's the whole, that's the whole argument, right? When you talk, and it really comes down to socioeconomic issues, I think, more than anything. If you were set back as a result of, prior years, like let's say that, your parents were victims of racism, right? You may not have been able to get into the college that you wanted to get into, right? I think the issue, though, is, people being born today, they didn't necessarily contribute to that, right? So they're looking at it like, why am I being impacted? I think you have to be cognizant of the fact that people have had, some sort of uphill battle and try to take that into account. I think at the same time, like, reparations may not be the appropriate way to approach things, right? So I don't know, there's a balance there. There really is. Like, and I think about it even just, kids driving down to the road, if he only makes $10 an hour and he can't, pay for all the insurances and all the things, and he gets picked up because he doesn't have a registration. Now he's got a speeding ticket. He's dealing with that. Like, it's just, there's a whole societal part of, socioeconomics that ends up impacting kids. So,
Geez, you are a registered Democrat, right?
I am.
Hey, you sound like a centrist, though. Like, you could never survive a primary.
I can't even survive an election, apparently. No, but so here's the thing. Why am I still a Democrat? Because I think it's worth bringing these talking points forward and saying, hey, this is how I feel about this, right? And actually have like a discussion that's going to be productive. The problem I found in general is I've got friends on both sides of the spectrum, right? Whether it's, super right-wing Republican, super left-wing Democrat, and they just love to attack you. They don't actually want to have a discussion as to how you can find some sort of meaningful middle of the road, solution. They just want to tell you why you're wrong or make you feel bad about yourself. I'm here to help people. That's always how I've approached it, right? Okay, I understand your plight. I understand your plight. There's got to be some sort of middle ground so that we're not just sitting here infighting all the time, right? So.
Right. There's the old saying that in politics, the middle of the road is where you find roadkill. But I feel like that's more so now than, at any point in my lifetime.
But again, and that goes across the board, like all programs. Like I had Seti Warren, he was running for governor back in the day.
Blast from the past.
Yeah, I had him on my radio show. But one of the things I really wanted to talk to him about was Section 8 housing. And there are issues that exist within Section 8 housing. The overall thought of it is great, but what are we doing to really make those programs more efficient so that you have people that aren't using it and abusing it? Ways that, it's not just money being thrown away, right? I want this program to survive and thrive, right? He didn't really want to have that discussion, truthfully. And I was taken back a little bit by that because here I am, trying to fix things, and I didn't feel like he was really trying to work towards a solution, right? And I gave him this example. I had a kid, he came and helped me one day doing moving, right? So I give him some cash. I go, why don't you go get a job? You're super smart. You're very talented. You could go work over here. He goes, well, I can't work there because if I work there, my family will lose our Section 8 voucher because our total family income will go up. So here's a kid who's like 18, 19 years old who should be trying to progress himself through society. I'm going, well, then we're failing ourselves as a society. We're not allowing people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and become better, right? Like those... How do we fix that in a program?
Joe, preach, man. That's, so you end up with 3-4 generations of people living in Section 8 or subsidized, whatever you want to call it.
And I don't think they want to.
But also if you provide there are some who are going to just try to post their way through life. Yeah. But most would benefit and would rather get out. But if you punish them, if they better themselves just enough to get over that line where they lose the housing subsidy, the fuel assistance, the health insurance, etc., it's a disincentive. So I can't afford it that way. We should be providing these services once people have gotten a job as well to help them get to that point. But good luck saying that on a debate stage or whatever.
No,
right?
but I've been attacked by a lot of people on a number of different fronts, and anything that I've ever said is not to be malicious or mean or to create problems for people, but it's more, how do we get to the solution? And just, defriending me, or, I don't have a whole lot of people that do that, but in general, like, that's how they treat. It's like, you know what, I can't be friends with you ever again because you have an opposite viewpoint. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to sit here and try to work it till you understand where I'm coming from, right? In a polite and effective manner, and I take any issue. I can tell you like what people think on both sides.
We may get you there, but I guess it's easier to just call somebody a sycophant or brainwashed, or whatever,
sure.
than to actually. To me, once you start bringing up the name calling, that means your idea is lost, and you know it because you can't back. I'll argue my ideas with anybody, and I'll even change my mind. But once it gets into the name calling, you've kind of. Yeah, I think you've lost the argument. That's my That's my tell sign for when somebody is lost. There is an interesting question on the Chelmsford ballot, though. It's a ballot question regarding cannabis. Apparently, Chelmsford is considering a second crack at cannabis.
Yeah,
pardon my pun there, but they want to change the zoning to allow the sale of recreational marijuana in the town. Now, when that ballot initiative came up, the way it worked is if your town voted no,
right.
In that, if the majority of people in your town said no, you don't get a marijuana license.
Right. We actually voted at town meeting to specifically exclude marijuana from our town.
At town meeting.
Correct.
But in that election, did Chelmsford approve it?
So it was brought. So it was like I remember back in the day, it was like a twofold process. Town had to vote for it, and town meeting had to approve it. And ultimately, it was voted down at town meeting. I voted for it. I thought it would have been a great revenue stream for the town. At the time, the chief of police had gotten up and said, I'm concerned about the element that we'll bring into our community. We really don't want to have these issues that, Tyngsboro and some of our other surrounding towns are going to have. But I think you have to look at it from more of a regionalized viewpoint. Someone that's purchasing cannabis products, they're most likely, because I owned a liquor store for a number of years, they don't, they're not using the product to the store, right? They go to the store, they buy it.
They're not going to sit in your parking lot.
Right. Then they drive home and they recreationally use it at their house or wherever assuming they're law. I mean, there's always people that break the law, but, assuming the majority of people are lawfully using it the way they do alcohol or any other, drug, they're already coming back into your town with the product. There's nothing preventing them. The only thing that's happening is you're losing the revenue stream that you would have gotten from these businesses that would have set up shop. And if you ever look at CCC standards, they're pretty strict. So I didn't talk a whole lot about this, but I actually had a provisional licensure from the Cannabis Commission. But I ultimately, after looking at it, I said, you know what, the industry as a whole is becoming way too oversaturated, right? Like this is going to be a business that's going to ultimately, fail because there's just too much of it. And you need to, not enough demand, really.
And that's the interesting part of this. It looks like Chelmsford now wants to at least say, okay, let's get in on this revenue. How much revenue are you going to get at this point? Lowell has a handful of shops, a bunch of surrounding communities do, and I'm sure they'll get some business in Chelmsford, but it's not going to be the revenue they would have gotten if they were one of the first communities.
Right, and I think
come in on this.
Yeah, for the most part, like Chelmsford's just too late. We're always like that. We're just too late to the to the apple. It's in this case, by the time they actually get it, permitted or whatnot, like. Somebody might open up a facility, but it's not going to bring the same sort of community revenues. And I know that a lot of these cannabis places are going to start fighting back on, how much they're providing to communities. A lot of them get 3% of, revenue that's brought in to offset, the cost of, firefighters and police and all this stuff. That's going to start going away, and you'll see it going away. Where you see communities thriving, Tyngsboro, for instance, if you drive down 3A, up into Nashua, like it's illegal in in New Hampshire, right? So you have all these people coming over the borders, all these, border crossers, right? You guys love that.
Legally or illegally?
Yeah, so they're coming over, they're purchasing cannabis, they're going back into New Hampshire, right? So there's it's like you can just see like lines out the door. But I drive down Westford Street. I think there's a retail shop over there. I never see lines. I never see anybody outside. Now I don't know, maybe they're going through a back door or something. But
the medicinal one in Lowell, near the Wang Towers there.
Yeah,
that always had lines when it first opened.
Patriot or something.
Yeah, but now that the recreational came in, even that one doesn't have lines anymore. So I think a lot of the medical people are just going to the recreational shops. But that said, where Chelmsford could be interesting is you mentioned Tingsboro, but most of the surrounding communities of Chelmsford don't have them, right?
I would say
Actons, do they have shops?
Yeah, like Littleton, Ayr. You've got. I mean, there's plenty of communities. Tingsboro, pretty sure Drake it has.
Drake it has.
I mean, I think Chelmsford's like one of the only communities really at this point that doesn't have any sort of options. So
who are you going to steal from? Who are you going to steal business from now at this point?
I don't think we care. I feel like we're like, it's almost like Dunstable. Like, is Dunstable going to bring in liquor licenses at this point? Like, they've been a dry community. Like, it's like they just hop over to Tingsboro, get their stuff, and bring it back to Dunstable, right? They don't really, or Pepperell or whatnot. They don't really care, And I think, residents of Chelmsford aren't really that concerned about it either.
To the point where I did not know about it until I read the story about you moderating the debate, that there's also a ballot initiative on there.
Well,
so do people even know? Will they even get to the bottom of their ballot under planning board and town committee or whatever to see that ballot question?
Well, if you want to be financially smart, you'll vote for it, because ultimately, we're going to have, funding issues coming up, relatively soon, and new growth is ultimately, a big part of that. And if you look at a grow facility, it's like it's really just a bunch of plants housed in a building. It's not, you're employing a few people, but you're not bringing in the same kind of traffic and issues that some of these other, warehousing things do, that, everybody gets all bent out of shape because they don't want trucks coming in and out of their community, right? It's a pretty low level thing that most of the time you drive by one of these, you don't even know anything's happening. Yeah. So
I think I'm a yes on it. I don't know how many other people in my household are going to bother to show up.
I already voted yes once, so I'll vote yes again on it. But again, I don't. I wasn't able to control the narrative there. The narrative was, this is going to bring drugs and illegal, other things going on as a result. So,
which brings me to my final election-related question: what is the turnout going to be? If I remember, last year's was what, like 6%, or did I? You didn't hit 10%.
My official prediction, it's going to be abysmal. I mean, usually a school committee race will bring out, a good number of participants, but I don't even, you have two incumbents that have served and done a great job over all those years. You just, and Doreen, unfortunately, where she doesn't have kids in the school, I don't think she's going to be driving out now that doesn't mean she won't win, but I don't think that's going to drive the traffic up, right? A guy like Salapoli runs, and it's like people that have never voted before in their life are like, oh, I got to vote for Big Sal, right?
Where's Norman Van Loo when you need him?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But, the ballot questions sometimes have a way of driving turnout and then leading to surprises on other parts of the ballot.
True.
Is this one doesn't even seem to have, I don't see signs up anywhere saying yes or no.
No, the ballot questions that tend to drive people have like some sort of major impact towards, either like internal government, or they're impacting some sort of group. Here it's like, I don't think people really care whether people capitalize on, the ability to sell marijuana or not. Certainly it would be great for the town and the revenue would be good. But I think the stigmatism of that industry is now essentially eradicated, right? Like most people are like, yeah, we get it. Alcohol, marijuana. I think we focus ourselves on, let's crack down on some of these, heavier drugs. So.
Yeah, whatever you think about it, it's been proven now that some of those fear tactics about it's going to bring organized crime and that might be doing away with.
They did a great job at rolling it out. I think they eliminated a lot of that ability for, organized crime to come in and take advantage, right? So that's great. So they did a good job there.
All right. Statewide, a lot of folks think the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is in trouble financially. A lot of it based on some of these issues we talked about earlier, the immigration, the migrant shelters, whatever. The governor seems to be rolling back. She said by the end of this 2025, there will be no more migrants into the shelters. we believe that means you won't have a flood of them pouring in. Saw a story this morning, 30%, we're down to 30% now of a drop of 30%, I should say, in the number of migrants being housed in emergency shelters. Chelmsford doesn't have that, right? You have your hotels in Chelmsford, if I remember, I guess our hotels, because I live right down the street from two of them, they're being used as kind of homeless shelters and have been for years. Right?
I mean,
not for migrant reasons, though, correct?
Not that I know of, but that doesn't mean that people that have migrated here aren't living in those particular shelters.
Correct. It's not an emergency shelter set up.
That I don't. I actually don't know the specific. I do know that we do have housing shelters that were once hotels. Yeah. I don't know specifically how they're being used.
I know the town manager had said to me right before the governor grabbed the ICC here in Lowell that they kicked the tires on the Radisson, or half of it, or whatever it is now. But ultimately they decided against it. But is the budget issues. Are you afraid they're going to trickle down eventually to the town of Chelmsford? Like we're seeing in Drake, Drake instituting a trash fee now, and they're still, they're talking about potential override question. Has Paul Cohen and the select board and everyone else involved with them, have they positioned Chelmsford where they can withstand whatever's coming?
Yes, 100%. I think Paul has done a great job on that front. We built up an amazing stabilization fund. I mean, we have really put ourselves in a great position over the years to really weather that kind of storm. Because I remember 2008, I mean, we were at town meeting having discussions about how we were going to put like advertising on buses to try to bring in some extra revenue, right? And I think Paul's approach of putting money into stabilization so that we weren't in that boat when the next shoe were to drop. So I think Chelmsford as a whole is going to be good. Where Chelmsford's got problems is, a lot of communities rely on, new growth to try to like offset some of the inability for, their 2.5% increase. We haven't had a ton of new growth because we don't have any sewer capacity. So you haven't seen a whole lot of building. You haven't seen a whole lot of new permitting as a result of that standpoint. So that could have an impact. That's more of a, systemic issue for our town, I think, than a managerial issue. Although, we could have tried to build a new, plant, up in North Chelmsford, 4 or 5 years ago. It'd be probably done, in a couple of years. And then we would have been, able to build some new structures. But
how about the school budgets and with what's going? Is there concern? Was it discussed at the debate about the Department of Education and its elimination?
Yeah, there was,
and how that could affect.
I don't think they were concerned so much from a curriculum standpoint. I think Massachusetts Department of Education is pretty robust, and so the standards that they provide are, probably far exceed, federal standards. However, there is always the concern that, you've eliminated the department. The department is reallocating money across the board. I don't know yet how that's going to necessarily impact us, but no matter what, it's going to have some impact. So we have to then, decide how we're going to maneuver. But on take migrant housing and some of those, issues, one of the things that bothered me specifically was the governor came out and said, I'm now going to just tax the residents of Massachusetts a higher amount. Except we're going to actually tax self-employed people even more money. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I being picked on, right? Is that equitable? I don't know,
because
right?
Small business is the backbone of the U.S. economy, so let's tax the bejesus out of the backbone.
So that's if I were my messaging to the Democratic Party is we need to be more encompassing to small businesses and medium-sized businesses. A lot of the regulations we try to put in place, really hurt small businesses a lot. A lot of the reporting and all of these things. You go up into Nashua and it's like the place is chock full of businesses left and right. And a lot of it is they don't have to do all of these additional reporting things. It's hard enough to be selling the product or doing the service that you need to do, but then on top of it become, the accountant, the person, the custodial services, right? You have to become all of these people and they don't see all of the time and cost and effort that goes into that, as an individual trying to run a small business. So, I wish they would take a better viewpoint and eye towards small businesses as though, they were the same as somebody that works, unions or, other areas.
Well, as a small business person, you know that every time they say, "Well, we're just targeting big corporations,"
unfortunately those regulations
you don't hit
come
the big
in.
corporations, right? Because they can pack up and relocate to a more tax-friendly climate. You can't pack up. It's not as easy for you to pack up your business or my family to pack up ours. And I don't think people truly grasp that when you start putting these regulations and specific revenue, what we'll call the measures in, that you're ultimately hitting small business.
Well, I'll never forget this, but I got a call from Georgia one day, and it was like, you've been assigned to some survey that like some business thing, right, where the government wanted to know about my business every week. I had to report on every employee I had, and it was mandated. And I'm like, how did I get? I'm like, I'm just trying to get this thing rolling, and I now have to report. I remember the woman called me like every week, and she'd be like, we'd laugh, and I'd answer all the questions again and whatnot. But why are you doing that to someone that's just like, I need to spend that time really focused on trying to generate revenue for that business so that it will survive. That's why so many small businesses go under in such a short period of time. There's a lot that goes into it. So.
I think we've destroyed any chance you have of winning a state.
Hey, I'm never running for anything ever again, honestly.
You sure?
I'm 100% sure. You'll never see my name outside of town meeting rep on a ballot. And I'm just going to tell you how it is. It doesn't, I'm here to help people. And I always said that, and I'll be part of the community, but I've never needed to do that through an elected position. I can do that just as much through the people that are already elected. So
I think that's a shame. Not that this would help you. This would probably hurt your election chances even more. But I think your style of Democrat, the centrist Democrat, of which I kind of grew up as in that kind of a household, it's sorely lacking nowadays. And it'd be nice if we could somehow get back there.
Yeah. Well, you know what? All you can do is roll up your sleeves and be a part of the solution and not just bury your head in the sand, right? I don't love a lot of the things that are happening. I look at it like, if you want to make effective change, you need to change your messaging at some point. Otherwise, we're just going to be left in the dust, and you're never going to get any of your principles forward. So
we're going to end it here. Joe Reddy, Town of Chelmsford, thank you for joining us.
Get out and vote April 1st.
Yes, I'm heading out there tomorrow.
Awesome.
So I'll see you. We'll see you in a few weeks or in a month or so. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you. That's Joe Reddy joining us here on the Daily Pulse. We got a full week of Daily Pulse shows lined up for you tomorrow. We're going to talk to a kind of the who's who of local authors here in the city of Lowell. As my friend Steve O'Connor, Paul Marion, whose latest book I just started going through myself, and Emily Noel Provost will be here. On Wednesday, we're going to be joined by former Lowell Mayor Bill Samaras and current City Councilor Vesna Noon. And then on Friday, the Pod Squad will be here. We'll have a little fun on Friday and annoy some people, as we always seem to do. I want to thank everybody for joining us on today's Daily Pulse with Joe Reddy. Till tomorrow morning, everybody stay safe, stay dry out there. Watch out for that fog. Until next time, we'll see you on the other side.